A teen boy was cornered by 5 hyenas. In the desert, then a German shepherd emerged from the dust, and everything changed. The sun was sinking fast behind the jagged ridges of the Algerian desert, painting the dunes in copper and blood. Noah, 15 years old and trailing, behind the volunteer group by nearly half a mile. Emily had stopped to photograph the dying light spilling through a narrow slit in the sandstone cliffs. The silence had been beautiful until it became unbearable. By the time he realized he was lost, the wind had already begun to shift. He tried calling out, but his voice was swallowed by distance and sand. His phone had no reception. His water bottle was nearly empty. The map in his pocket flapped uselessly as a gust of wind caught the hem of his shirt. Panic set in as the shadows deepened. The temperature dropped and the realization hit him. He was alone. He stumbled along a dry ravine, its walls rising like the spines of sleeping beasts. It seemed safer than the open dunes, but it was a dead end. And then he heard it. A low guttural sound echoed through the silence, followed by the unmistakable rustle of paws on gravel. Noah froze. From behind, a rock outcropping to his left, a set of glowing yellow eyes locked onto him. Then another, then 3 more. 5 hyenas stepped into ravine. They moved with the terrifying patience of predators who knew their advantage. Their powerful shoulders rolled with each step, jaws flexed open and shut. Their laughter not humorous, but hollow, feral, and cruel. One of them circled left. Another took position on the opposite side. Noah backed up until his heel struck a boulder. There was nowhere left to go. His breath came short. His legs trembled. He tried to shout, but the sound died in his throat. He reached for anything, a rock, a stick, but the ground offered no defense. The largest hyena lowered its head, growled deep from its chest, and took a slow, menacing step forward. That was when it happened. From behind a dune, through a thick veil of swirling sand, a shape emerged, a silhouette against the setting sun. It moved fast, precise, low to the ground, then rose to full height. As it came into view, a German shepherd, massive, silent at first. Then it bared its teeth and let out a sharp, thunderous bark that split the air. The hyenas froze. Every one of them stopped. Mid-step, the growl ceased. The circle broke. The air shifted. Then something stranger happened. The lead hyena looked directly at the dog. Its ears twitched. Its posture lowered, not in fear, but in recognition. It took one step back, and then another. The others followed. Noah, frozen in disbelief, watched as all 5 hyenas bowed their heads, not to him, but to the dog. The German shepherd stood between Noah and the pack, unmoving, unwavering. It glanced back at the boy only once, then faced forward, again, staring down the hyenas with a gaze that was not hostile, but command. The sand settled. The wind held its breath. Noah whispered, "What are you?" Years before Noah found himself cornered in the desert, long before the German shepherd emerged from the dust to stand. Between him and death, something extraordinary had happened on the edge of that very same wilderness. A story buried beneath sand and time. It began with violence. A pack of hyenas, strong, fast, cunning, had been targeted by illegal fur poachers. The adults were lured into a narrow canyon, trapped by crude metal snares. By dawn, they were dead. Their bodies were stripped, and the poachers vanished into the desert, unaware or uncaring that they had left behind 5 tiny pups in a shallow den, just beyond the rocks. The pups were less than a week old, their eyes still closed, their fur patchy, their cries, and weak. The heat rose quickly that morning. The sand grew blistering. One by one, they began to fade until he came. Coda, he was a German shepherd, perhaps 5 years old at the time, battered by his own history. Once a family dog, then abandoned when his owners fled a war-ravaged town. He had wandered for years. Desert life had turned him lean, scarred, and sharp. But somewhere beneath the dust, an instinct still beat the heart of a guardian. When he stumbled upon the den, the first thing he heard was the faintest whimper. He approached cautious. He could have turned away. He could have taken advantage of their helplessness. But something in the smell, milk, blood, loss, stopped him. Instead of leaving, he curled around them. He licked their faces to cool them. He gave them the last of his water stored from a half-collapsed goat bladder he carried for survival. And when the sun dipped low, the air cooled enough to move, he limped through the desert and dragged back the smallest kill he could find, a desert rat for their first meal. For months, Coda became more than a protector. He became their teacher. He showed them how to move in silence, how to find water beneath rocks, how to hunt without drawing attention. He disciplined them with growls, corrected them with nips, played with them beneath the moonlight, and as the hyena pups grew, so did their bond. They never challenged him. They never forgot. But as seasons changed, so did fate. One morning, as the young hyenas dozed beneath a canopy of brush, Coda was spotted by a foreign animal rescue team, tracking wild dogs in the region. Thin, but remarkably well-fed and healthy, Coda was tranquilized and airlifted to a rescue center in the United States. His story unknown, his family left behind. In that distant sanctuary, he was fed, bathed, vaccinated, and eventually placed in a rehabilitation program for war-traumatized canines. That was where Noah first met him, 15 years old. Volunteering alongside his father, Noah had been the only one Coda let touch him. At first, the boy's voice was soft, his hand steady. Noah gave him a name. When the others called him Case 271, he called him Coda. And then one day after months of care, the kennel gate was found swinging open. No paw prints, no trail. Coda had vanished. Until now, the desert night was falling fast, and the air shifted from blistering heat to biting cold in mere minutes. The sun dipped behind the dunes, casting long, trembling shadows across the sand. Noah stood frozen, his back against a jagged rock wall, his heart pounding so loudly he could barely hear his own breath. In front of him, 5 adult hyenas hovered in a half circle, snarling low, confused, restrained not by fear, but by familiarity, and between them and the boy, like a weathered monument of instinct and memory, stood the German shepherd, Coda. Noah squinted through the settling dust, the curve of the ears, the proud neck, the long, battle-worn body, that face. He barely whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. Coda, is that really you? The dog stiffened, then turned. For a moment their eyes met, and something ancient passed between them, as though time had folded inward, and 2 souls long separated had just found each other again. Coda bolted forward, not with aggression, but with joy. He bounded to Noah and licked his face feverishly, whining softly, nudging the boy's chest, burying his muzzle into the hollow beneath his shoulder as if to confirm he was real. Noah sank to his knees, clutching Coda's neck, tears rising hot and fast. I thought you were gone. I thought I lost you forever. Coda pulled away gently, turned his head toward the hyenas, and let out a single deep growl. One by one, the hyenas lowered their heads. The largest backed away first. The others followed, withdrawing not in fear, but deference. There was no need for violence. This was order. This was family. Noah stared, stunned. They're his, he breathed. He raised them. The wind howled overhead. Night fell completely. Stars blinked awake. The temperature dropped like a stone. Noah, too tired to think, curled beside Coda on the sand. The dog lay next to him, pressing his warmth into the boy's side. One of the hyenas settled a few feet. Away, ears alert. Another perched, silently atop a rock like a sentry. Noah's eyes fluttered shut, but safety was an illusion. Somewhere in the distance, first faint, then growing. Louder, the sound of an engine pierced. The quiet. Headlights swept across the dunes like blades. A jeep. Armed men. Inside. The metallic click of a rifle. Bolt echoed once, then again. Noah jerked awake as the vehicle skidded to A. Halt. The hunters had arrived. They leapt from the truck, shouting in A. Language Noah barely understood, but the intent was clear. They had tracked the hyenas for sport, for bounty, and now they had found something unexpected. A boy. One of them raised his weapon and pointed it directly at Noah's chest. Do not move, the man barked. Turn around. Coda placed himself immediately in front of the boy, his body low, tails stiff, teeth bared. The men laughed. One of them cocked his rifle. That dog dies. First, but before a shot could be fired, 5 shadows erupted from the darkness. Behind them, the hyenas, they moved as one, silent, fast, lethal. The first attacker lost his weapon to a sudden lunge from the lead hyena, its jaws clamping onto the rifle barrel and wrenching it away. Another hyena rammed, a second man off balance, sending him sprawling into the sand. The third hunter turned to flee, but not before. Coda launched, swift and precise, crashing into his legs and sending him tumbling. A sharp cry rang out as Coda's. Teeth found his boot and clamped down, disabling him without killing. The remaining hunters scrambled into the jeep and sped off, panicked by what they could not comprehend, a coordinated ambush between a German shepherd and 5 hyenas. Protecting, not attacking, Noah sat up slowly, heart pounding, surrounded now by his unlikely protectors. He looked at Coda, who stood, tall, chest rising and falling with exertion, eyes still locked on the retreating lights, and all Noah could say was, "You came back not for yourself, but for them and for me." The desert was silent again, but nothing felt the same. The sun rose over the vast dunes like a slow-burning flame, casting long golden fingers across the desert. The storm had passed. The world looked calm again, but something had shifted. Noah sat cross-legged on the cool sand, wrapped in a survival blanket, given to him by the search crew just an hour earlier. His face was strewn with dirt, his lips cracked from dehydration, and his clothes hung loosely off his frame, torn, sun-bleached, and crusted with dust. But he was alive. Next to him sat Coda, silent, unmoving, his body angled between the boy and the open desert. The German shepherd's coat rippled in the early wind, and though he bore new scratches and a slight limp from the previous night's battle, he was poised, alert like a soldier holding the line. Flanking them in a loose semicircle were 5 hyenas. Their massive bodies shifted slightly, muscles taut, heads low. They were restless, every instinct in their blood urging them to run, to disappear. But something held them there. Their eyes never left Coda. Their ears twitched at his slightest movement. It was not fear. It was allegiance. The rescue team had arrived just after dawn in a roaring helicopter, the blades chopping the sky, and breaking the deep quiet of the morning. As the chopper touched down in, a spray of dust, armed rangers spilled, out with rifles drawn, shouting orders, ready to confront the worst. Then they saw what surrounded the boy and froze. Noah, a teenager barely on the edge of manhood, sat like a figure in a forgotten story, half myth, half truth, guarded by a German shepherd and 5 wild hyenas, as if they were royal. Sentinels sworn to an ancient code. 1 ranger stepped forward cautiously, gun raised. Do not move, son. Stay where you are. Coda immediately positioned himself in front of Noah, his growl low but unmistakable, a warning carved from loyalty and F. The hyenas responded. Instantly, their ears flattened, their stance widened, their eyes locked onto the rifles. Another ranger shouted, panic rising. The hyenas are circling. Take the shot. No, Noah cried out, his voice breaking with the sheer weight of desperation. They are not attacking. They are his family. Do not shoot. The moment trembled, guns half raised, fingers twitching, fear palpable. Then the rescue supervisor took a step forward. He scanned the scene not with fear, but something closer to awe. He watched Coda's stillness, the tension of the hyenas held not by force but by trust, and he knew whatever this was, it was not what they had trained for. Behind the rescue team, another group had gathered, reporters, biologists, and representatives from conservation groups who had followed the story from the moment the boy went missing. The sound of cameras clicking, drones buzzing, and people whispering in disbelief filled the space. And then, in the midst of the chaos, Coda moved. He turned his back to the rifles, to the cameras, to the noise. He walked slowly toward Noah, pressed his forehead against the boy's chest, then gently licked the dirt from his cheek, just as he had done on the day they first met years ago in a rescue center far from this place. It was not a show, it was a goodbye. Coda turned back, faced a hyena, and ran. They followed without hesitation, not in chaos, not in panic, but in perfect train formation, a silent exodus up the ridge, into the wind, into the light. Noah instinctively stood, his legs trembling. He almost called out, almost, but stopped. He understood. Coda had chosen. He had saved him. He had fulfilled his promise. But he was no longer a creature of leashes and collars. He was a leader of the wild, an architect of something unthinkable, and his place was beyond the reach of man. The cameras kept rolling. The world watched breathless, and Noah said nothing except for the words only a few would ever understand. He does not belong in our world, but he still watches over it. In the weeks that followed, the footage circled the globe. News anchors called a miracle. Animal behaviorists were baffled. Was it loyalty, pack dynamics, conditioning? None of them could explain it. But Noah did not speak to the media. He did something else. He signed a proposal to fund a stretch of desert land previously unclaimed and untouched. The paperwork was simple. The title was not. He named it the Wildkin Preserve. There were no fences, no cameras, no forestudy. It simply existed like Coda, like the family he chose, like the bond no science could ever measure. Years had passed since that fateful day in the desert. The world had moved on, as it always does. The dramatic footage of a teenage boy encircled by 5 hyenas, silently protected by a German shepherd, had once captivated millions. It was replayed in lectures, debated in conservation forums, and quietly filed away in nature documentaries as one of those rare, unexplainable phenomena, the kind that science could observe but never truly define. Yet while the world turned it into legend, Noah, the boy at the heart of it all, chose a different road. He did not give interviews. He never signed a book deal. He refused every invitation to turn his experience into a platform or career. Instead, he walked away from the attention and walked deeper into the wild. What happened to him in the desert had not made him famous. It had made him quiet. He became a conservationist, not the kind who sat in offices or posed for glossy brochures, but the kind who tracked silently across snowfields in Mongolia, who slept under canvas in the Amazon, who studied wolves in the cold forests of Scandinavia and hyenas in the heat-cracked plains of Namibia. He watched, he listened, he learned, and everywhere he went, he carried something no one could see, a memory he never explained, a loyalty that shaped every choice, and the echo of a bond that had defied nature, logic, and fear. He never told the full story until one spring morning many years later, the phone rang. A ranger from the wild kin, preserve, now a quiet sanctuary, protected from development and untouched by tourism, spoke gently. Coda had passed old age, they said peacefully, alone beneath a bent acacia tree near the sandstone ridge where long ago he had first brought 5 orphan hyenas and shown them how to survive. Noah did not ask questions. He did not need to. He boarded a plane that night. When he arrived, the desert welcomed him like a long-lost brother. There were no reporters, no ceremony, just sky, wind, and the hum of distant heat. He walked the final stretch alone. There, nestled in a natural hollow, was a circle of stones, simple, unmarked, save for a smooth central rock. On its surface, time had worn soft carvings, a single, large paw print surrounded by 5 smaller ones. Below it, a shallow impression in the earth where something heavy had once rested. Noah knelt. He reached into his pack and took out an old scarf. It was thin, frayed at the edges, the color long, faded from gold to sand. He placed it gently over the stone. For a moment, there was no sound. Then the wind stirred. A slow spiral of dust danced across the clearing, lifting the scarf, slightly like a breath. Noah sat with it, unmoving, until the sun began to sink. And then, just as the last light touched the rocks, he saw it, a silhouette on the far ridge, tall, still, familiar shepherd, its form clear, only for a heartbeat, long enough for the eyes to gleam, for the wind to carry the faintest whisper of presence. Then it was gone like a shadow swallowed by dusk. Noah closed his eyes. He was never meant to stay, he said softly. He was meant to guard the place where wild hearts meet. And then he stood, not with grief, but with gratitude. Behind him, the wind smoothed the sand, erasing footprints, leaving only silence, except for the desert itself, which seemed to pause and remember